I come from theater. I was originally worked with a lot of different theater companies, doing anything from lighting design to set construction to performance. And I toured a lot with a theater company at a young age, and developed sort of a sense of narrative skills through that, and also an appreciation for the performing arts as well as for film, and was impressed with a lot of the power of documentary to sort of tell, acute stories that were vital. And from there, I started to travel a lot and wanted to sort of convey what I was seeing around the world. And then eventually came to Concordia, went to school, did a film degree in communications, and then started a production company making documentary films. One of the earlier films that I made was when I was in Concordia going to school, and it covered the student politics and issues around accessibility to education and accessibility to free space, and so that was sort of what launched my initial career. And then from there I worked on a production called Walltown, which was sort of the genesis of my documentary career, and basically went on to found a documentary production company called Loaded Pictures, and the focus of that was social, political documentaries that dealt with current affairs, dealt with issues that I think need to be challenged, in terms of either debated or discussed or explored, and need a lot more attention brought to them by the public than they currently have. Walltown was a really fun film for me. I mean, when I originally was approached by the team that was going on the tour, it was a group, Ezra Winton, who was the sort of Uber Culture was his organization at the time, and it was a university chapter. They were interested in challenging sort of the hegemony that is Walmart. And they were, of course, looking at distinct issues around Walmart internationally, and how it deals with the labor issues abroad, and also in terms of how it deals with the community issues locally, in terms of sort of starving downtown cores. And originally I wasn't aware of Walmart being sort of a negative factor per se. I mean, I've definitely heard about it a lot, but never really explored sort of the negative consequences of Walmart. So I was quite intrigued. And there was very little that was, initially, funding for the film, or sort of a real, manifest project attached to it. So basically we jumped on the tour. It was very last minute. We raised a small bit of financing to jump off, and it was a cross-country tour, and it was quite exciting. It was a very young group, so there was a lot of spontaneity, a lot of energy, and the issues sort of built as we went, and there was a lot of things that became very clear about the project. And largely it was that it was and still is one of the largest companies in the world, has some of the highest the most employees in the world for a private company. It is one of the most litigated companies in the world outside of the United States of America, and so, as well as being, number one in terms of profit, number one in terms of gross sales, gross revenue. And so, as a consequence of having, being, a model trendsetter, due to its size, we wanted to really critically examine sort of, its practices and how it benefits from this. And of course, what came out of it was just a lot of subsidies the government was giving, in all different parts of the world. Was subsidizing their development and supporting the store through numerous practices that ultimately was at a consequence of their employees and other local businesses. So the film eventually got support from the National Film Board, and other broadcasters came on board as well. And so it ended up doing very well, and consequently launching, to some extent, my documentary career, and also just pushing the issue. Really for us, I think that Walmart took a beating, definitely during that period, from films like Walltown as well as others. And because of the consequences of the way that it was, relating to consumers and customers, as well as employees, and I think that it's definitely had to re-examine the way it relates and the way it does business with its employees and its suppliers, and we can only hope that is a cause or a consequence of films like Walltown and others. There's a certain visceral power, I think, that film has. I believe in telling stories. Like storytelling is a powerful medium. I believe in the role of the narrator in exploring things that stories that we don't necessarily get access to day to day, and I believe in the long form of storytelling, in drawing out and going deeper into something, and as long as we can, as long as we can keep keep the strength of the story and the momentum of the story going. And also, I believe that we have a responsibility. Filmmakers we have a platform, we have the tools. We have access, and we have the ability to get that access, and so there's a responsibility that comes with that, and it's a responsibility to tell stories that aren't normally told, to explore issues that need to get heard, and also I think that fundamentally, the stories are going to be political whether you acknowledge them or not, and I think it's a disservice to tell a story and not acknowledge the political ramifications, whether it be the discussion about the color pink or, about the local politicians. There's fundamentally there is, deep-seated politics in terms of any decision that we make, and filmmakers, I think, especially documentary filmmakers, there's a strong balancing point that we sit at. We sit at the storytelling ethics and the telling of rich stories, and then this, what are we trying to say? And for me, that's a very fluid space, but it's an important space, and I intend to explore it in all my films. I think strongly about the power of cinema and the fact that we can reach huge audiences because of the stories we want to tell. I've been doing a lot more producing in my career now, and so I'm producing currently. I just finished a documentary that played at Hot Docs called El Huaso. And it was by a really talented young filmmaker by Carlo Guillermo Proto. And it covers the issues of suicide, and it's a very personal story following his father's decision to potentially take his life. And so it's a very intimate examination of all the issues from the inner telling of that story, and it's beautifully done, wonderfully shot, and it's going to be playing at the documentary channel coming up. And another film I'm working on is with Martin Duckworth, who's sort of been around since the beginning of the early days at the NFB, and is a very powerful filmmaker. And we're looking at an activist playwright who writes plays, powerful political plays in the Verdun area, and sort of the working class issues are covered strongly within his plays. And so we're following the process of him mounting what could be maybe one of his last plays. He's in a wheelchair because of some unknown disease, and he's an award-winning playwright, and so this play that he's doing covers the issues around Verdun and the sacrifices it made during the First World War, both in terms of the factories that were producing arms during the First World War and the Second World War, and the soldiers that had the highest casualty rates of any community in Canada originating out of Verdun. So it's it's right on the heels of the 100th anniversary of the First World War, and it sort of looks at sort of the continuation of the struggles of Verdun to sort of establish itself, and the sacrifices it made basically to put Westmount on the map, because it was largely sort of for the profit of Westmount. So very much class issues, very much war as a consequence of benefiting those that aren't necessarily fighting it. Being a documentary filmmaker in Canada is challenging, although we have established a lot of important sort of support networks that we have through hard work and history established over the time, but a lot of that support is being attacked through current structures, basically through the government is threatening some of that, as well as the broadcasters within sort of new contemporary media influences. But the cuts to the arts have been very strong recently, and that's had a major impact on filmmaking, and especially documentary filmmaking. The cuts to CBC end up totally eroding our support base and taking out resources that would normally go to our community. The cuts to the National Film Board are another massive cut structure that is also eradicating our support structure. And so it's becoming harder and harder for us to make the important political social documentaries that we need to make, especially the one-offs, which tend to have more of a theatrical life, tend to have a broader audience, tend to be less associated with commercial advertising, tend to be freer of the influences that traditional television or serial television tends to influence on documentaries. So a lot needs to be done to continue to carve out sort of the important role that documentaries make. Traditionally we are known as a country that exports documentaries. We're known as a quality professional documentary community, and that needs to be maintained. And we have to put forward that these are values that need to be continued to be supported, and we have huge audiences. There's every year the festivals tend to have a broader audience take, so there's no less demand for the films we're making, but for some reason the business and commercial communities tend to be funding less and less of the work that we're making. In essence, they realize that they may be able to get it for less, and we're a smaller community, so we're easily able to be sort of pinched amongst other more commercial streams. So we have to continue to sort of speak out and say, no, these are values that we want, and we need Canadians to speak out and say, no, these are values that we want. And unfortunately, we live in a very capital-based society, and certain things aren't valued based on a capital system, and the arts and documentaries in particular have a less valued scaled rating. So those that are at the top, are sensationally overrated, and those that are closer to the bottom are underrated. And they are essential for the contribution of healthy debate, discussion, and the appropriate art and entertainment. So I think constantly re-examining that the disadvantage that a capital system puts on the arts is necessary, and I think that's part of our role as filmmakers, but also trying to get as much support as we can from the audience to continue watching the documentaries. We've got great support so far, and we want to make that continue to happen, but also to force government to not continue to cut the arts. Cinema Politica is a wonderful organization for disseminating the films, that I'm talking about, the powerful one-off political documentaries. And it's a great way for there to be sort of an interactive discussion. There's a great way for filmmakers to be able to access, engaged audience. And I have been lucky to have 4 of my films play at Cinema Politica, and every time it's some of the best audience reactions you can hope for. It tends to be some of the most invigorating debates. It tends to launch the films in wonderful directions, and as well the network is very vast, so the films get a continuous life throughout the world ultimately. And it's been an essential part of Canadians to be able to truly export Canadian films, as well as other films of importance that aren't of Canadian origin. So I wholeheartedly support it, and believe we need more of it.
Maybe one more question.
Sure.
You mentioned that they screen 4 of your films, but there's only Walltown that's on. Maybe, do you mind talking about the most recent one that
Sure. I mean, the most recent one that played at Cinema Politica was H2Oil, and it was directed by Shannon Walsh, and it was a very powerful look at the tar sands in Alberta, and dealt with the consequences of water in relation to the mining of the tar sands and the environmental impacts that are associated with that. And of course the communities that all live downstream, which are native communities, and as such, of course, it opens up the whole issues around native rights and discrimination that native communities live under within Canada, in the unfair treaty relations that they have, and just ultimately, how far are we willing to sacrifice the access of water and healthy water in our community for the money that oil will bring, and the investments that come in from the tar sands are quite vast, but a lot of them are sold wholesale to foreign nationals as well as foreign corporations. So a real examination needs to be done, and the film opens up that discussion.
Was it during the time of the pipeline, or was it the pipeline after this movie?
The pipeline was after the movie, so it helped to launch the discussion there. It was one of the earlier films that came out. It played on Discovery in the States, it played on Sundance in Europe, and it played on Télé-Québec here in Quebec, as well as global across Canada. So it was, and it launched semi-theatrical as well, and it played at Cinema Politica across the chapters, and it was definitely, it framed the discussion around the amount of water that's being used and the pollution as a consequences of that, and to do with the tar sands, tailing ponds, which are so large you can see them from space, It's some of the largest the tar sands is the largest industrial project in the world right now, and it's a major discussion, as we're seeing with the leader of the opposition is having with the Conservative government at the moment, and the film explores those very issues, and hopes that we can realize that the oil is not going to go anywhere, and it's only going to get more valuable. So the more importance we place on preserving the environment, it's not going to cost us anything, in the long run. But the sooner we get it out, the less value we're going to get out of it, and the more of a cost we're going to have down the road in terms of fixing the environment. So it's really irresponsible of the Conservative government and the Alberta government to continually extract this resource at the fastest rate they possibly can, with no valuation for the environment or the consequences thereof.